schools have a big challenge in understanding the breadth, the diversity of career opportunities, particularly in our borough, but, much further beyond that as well. Perhaps, traditional industries, traditional career paths that schools are well versed in and know well are well covered. But those other areas, whether it be into engineering, whether it be into professional services, whether it be into trade services, are not as well established within schools as potential career paths. And equally then from the business side, allowing them to expose young people to a day in the life in any particular industry or any particular company is really valuable for them to try and nurture and inspire young people to understand you can have a career in pretty much anything here in Northern Ireland without having to go away.
Welcome to Workplus, the podcast that shines a light on the people doing good work across Northern Ireland. I'm your host, Richard Kirk, founder of Workplus. I've spent years working with employers, schools, colleges and universities, helping young people and career changers to make better informed career decisions. Each week, I sit down with real people doing real jobs to explore how they got there, what they've learned, and why their work matters. If you're a parent, teacher, carer, or just curious about what good work looks like today, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Steven, delighted to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with yesterday. So there was a celebration event for a work experience program that you've been behind for the last couple of years at council. Tell us about how that came about.
Well, look, we were just delighted to have so many people with us yesterday to celebrate what was the second full year of our work experience program. It came from our engagement with businesses on the ground, and it's something that the council is very, very focused on in terms of getting out to businesses and hearing the issues that they're facing on a day and daily basis. It's one of our core values, and it'll come as no surprise at all that skills, pipeline, career development, all of those things were top of their list in terms of challenges they were having. And I think during the pandemics, businesses that maybe had managed to develop relationships with some of the schools in our borough, and businesses that had garnered those relationships, struggled to rekindle them after the pandemic. Okay. And as part of our labour market partnership, we had established a school subgroup. And again, almost in a reciprocal way, we were hearing the same from schools, that they had no ends to businesses. They couldn't get connections. What used to happen around, factory tours or business people coming in to talk to children about career opportunities, all of that had kind of died away as one of the results of the pandemic. So through all of that engagement, we saw an opportunity to get involved in that gap between those two sides of that same coin, and try and coordinate and develop a program that looked at how we could maybe revisit the work placement, the work experience area, and get talent or future talent in the sense of school children into businesses. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of them are around a broad understanding. I think for us, schools have a big challenge in understanding the breadth, the diversity of career opportunities, particularly in our borough, but much further beyond that as well. And perhaps traditional industries, traditional career paths that schools are well versed in and know well are well covered. But those other areas, whether it be into engineering, whether it be into professional services, whether it be into trade services, are not as well established within schools as potential career paths. And equally then from the business side, allowing them to expose young people to a day in the life in any particular industry or any particular company is really valuable for them to try and nurture and inspire young people to understand, you can have a career in pretty much anything here in Northern Ireland without having to go away. Mm. So we started it because of that. We started it because of this gap between the two sides, and it's really grown from there. We've been so fortunate to have our partnership with Workplus in delivering it, but also the partnership we have with the businesses and the schools, bringing everybody together. And long may that continue.
Yeah. And so you're out engaging with businesses all the time. Like, what are the big talent challenges or skills challenges there that you're hearing as you meet with those businesses?
Well, let's start with the big one. It's volume. Mm-hmm. It's just a sheer volume debate. We have very, very low unemployment. We have very, very high employment, which is great for the economy, but it means that the pool of people ready and able and willing to work is very, very small. And if you take our borough, for example, before we look at the NI-wide picture, we have somewhere in the region of 2% unemployment, which is about 3,000 people, and we have somewhere in the region of 12 to 15,000 vacancies in the companies across our borough.
Yeah.
So short of developing more people, we need to find other ways of retaining and attracting talent into the companies in our borough. So that's probably the volume issue is the biggest challenge they're facing in terms of skills. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I think then more operationally, it's letting people understand the diversity of roles. So I think people still have this reasonably singular mindset around what skills and careers looks like. And I don't know if it comes from education system or if it's just developed as a kind of Northern Ireland psyche piece where if you want to work in creative industries, you have to go somewhere else. If you want to work in high value manufacturing, you have to go somewhere else. If you want to work in pharmaceuticals, sciences, you have to go somewhere else. All of that's completely untrue.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's such an awareness gap of opportunities and employers are really, really struggling to get that message out. They don't have the budget, capability, or resources, even within large companies who have big HR departments, to do that outreach to the extent where everybody in the geography would know that the company exists, B, that there are hundreds of roles, and C, this is how you would get into them, and here's all the pathways. So for us, and particularly in the business when we're out talking to them, the skills, big challenge over volume, but I think awareness is probably equally as important for them as well.
And in council, are you able to help address? So work experience is one of the ways to do that, but what are the other ways that you can get alongside a business to support them with those volume and awareness challenges?
It's a good question. It's a good question. There's so little we can do about the volume piece. It's one of these things. Birth rate across Northern Ireland is really low and has been for decades now. So, population change in our borough is about 100 people a year. So we're gaining 100 people a year. That's not going to solve this issue. We've had a period of flux around the migration and immigration question. And for lots of industries, that was a solution and probably still remains a solution in terms of how they fill the gaps, fill the posts, and do what they need to do. Obviously, there are challenges around that, as we've seen recently, and it's not straightforward. And it's certainly not straightforward, even logistically, with visas and with work permits and everything else that's required around that. So that option that used to be reasonably fluid and reasonably open and available to them isn't as such now. So we struggle with the volume piece. But what we really focus in on then is how we can get more people who are further away from the labour market into the labour market. And that is a big piece NI-wide as well. And the department are very clear on a strategy around how we need to tackle this economic inactivity issue that we have. But we also have, in our borough, we have somewhere again in the region of 15,000 people who could work, but for a variety of reasons choose not to work. And those are the people, not our retired people, not our students, not our people who have, care and responsibilities, but that portfolio, that cohort of people that choose not to work. And there's a whole range of reasons which we won't have time to get into today that they choose to do that. That's the challenge. That's the challenge. How do we get into those areas? How do we lift them? How do we give them confidence? How do we build their self-esteem? How do we do all of those things first? How do we then take that, build them into a training program, even if this is essential mathematics, essential English and literacy, essential ICT, whatever it might be, and then how do we take them from that into a baseline role in a company somewhere that interests them, and then how do you balance that against their own financial situation around welfare and all the rest of it? So that is the challenge we face, and we have a mechanism in which we try and tackle that through the Labour Market Partnership, which is solely focused really on economic inactivity and how we can help those individuals And so we really need to bring more of them into the labour market. That would certainly solve some of our volume issue. So that's where we spend a lot of, and particularly in the skills side, that's where we spend a lot of our capacity and a lot of our time.
Are there any examples of that labour market partnership actually working? In that sense, you mentioned about these programs, about mathematics or essential skills, and then how do we get people into jobs where they don't have the qualification? Can you give us any examples of that?
Absolutely. We have been so positive in terms of trying to develop courses that will interest people, firstly, but also that are required. So we have had a number of courses, and I suppose what we're trying to do, as I say, the first bit of the puzzle is accessing them. So you need to work really carefully with community leaders, with people in those areas to try and bring about that change that we want to bring. So we have run very successful courses that look at, or training initiatives that look at very simplistic things like self-esteem, confidence building, how to present yourself. Very simple stuff like how do you show up at the same place at the same time, dressed appropriately every day. How do you feed yourself for a day at work? Very, very simplistic ideas like that. And then we've maybe put, 200-300 people through courses like that over the last number of years. And then once we do that with them, they're in a better mindset to take on a low-level course, whether it be in mathematics or literacy or whatever it might be. And again, we have really good examples of that working in some of our areas where you're bringing, 20 or 25 in a cohort together to do a foundation course. And you find actually if you can keep the community group connected together, there's almost like a peer incentive to show up every day, and you get a cohort that really like working together from the same area, and they bring them through. And then the bit that we have, again, found reasonably successful in terms of how we've delivered it is what we would call upskilling courses. So we could work with companies really, really closely to understand where the gaps are in their current talent pool. And what we end up probably doing most of the time with them is giving them some financial support to upskill existing staff into more senior roles. So if I took warehousing and logistics, massive sector in Antrim Newtownabbey, probably the biggest in Northern Ireland in terms of proportionality. Well, we can take people who have been working on the factory or on the warehouse floor for 2 or 3 years and train them to be logistic planners, which is the big gap all logistics companies face, because there's much more complex world in terms of moving goods from one place to the other. And they need logistics planners. They need people who can map all that out. So you've got somebody in their facility who has been in the floor, knows the place back to front for a few years. What we'll do is we'll pay for their upskilling course, get them skilled as a logistics planner, and then the company will move them into that role. That then creates an opening for us to fill at that baseline level where you're stacking shelves, you're filling fulfillment orders, and we can move some of the people that we've brought through those base courses into those with the appropriate mechanisms around them to support employment, whether that be transport to the company, whether that be help with childcare, whether that be a whole variety of things. And we can bring them in at the bottom level and get them work, which is probably the most important thing.
Yeah, that's great, because I often think about it like it's an employer's responsibility to upskill their people and then to fill those gaps that are created. So why is the employer not just doing that themselves? Like why is council, are you involved in that then?
It probably comes down to costs for businesses, probably predominantly, and maybe a lack of vision. So for some of them, they think that the right route is just to continue to go out to the open market and try and attract the people at that middle management level that they might need. Obviously, we've just talked that those people don't exist. They're not available, or if they are available, there's about 10 companies looking for them. So the chances of you filling that role through that process, that very traditional recruitment process, is unlikely to happen. So we've been talking to lots of companies about this, and instead of trying to create additional roles at a lower level, we've decided the better way to do that is to try and reward and incentivize some of the people that have been working with them for a long time to come into a more senior role. And to be fair, the companies have really bought into it. And it is collaborative. You know, we pay some of it, the company pays some of it, but they equally have to then take on the cost of the new roles and take on the cost of potentially additional roles at a base level that they may or may not have replaced in the current economic climate that we're in. So the companies are committed, and we need them to be committed to it, because we require them to create roles for people and employ people who come through our schemes. They can't just go again to the open market and try and fill these positions we've created. We want them to use the pipeline that we have created for them to fill the roles. So the companies are really, really invested in it, and we've had a lot of success with it.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great way to think about it. As you say, not going out to the open market to try and get those roles, upskilling your existing staff, and then people in the borough who maybe are just at the right level to come in and those like that. Yeah, that's really, really helpful to think of it like that.
Yeah.
So we thought about some of the things you've been doing right now, and let's take it way back, right? So we talked about work experience. What did you do for work experience?
Oh my goodness, that is a good question.
Did you do any?
I did, and it proves exactly why the thing is broken, because I worked in a school, in a classroom, in a P4 classroom for a week, and knew within the first hour that it wasn't for me at all. Had no interest in being a teacher, no interest in being in school. In fact, anybody who will know me will tell you that that's exactly the wrong thing for me to do. I'd either be locked up, or there'd be children locked up by the end of the first day, and it would just not work. So yeah, I did work experience. It must have been in 4th form or 5th form. And again, my mum worked in a school. That was the easy option. That made most sense. She could take me there. She could bring me home. And if it didn't work, it wouldn't, no big deal. So yeah, it didn't work at all for me. And I got absolutely nothing from it, bar confirming that teaching and working with children was just not going to be where I ended up in life. There was just no way that was going to work. Yeah.
So what were the things that you did enjoy then when you were, say, back at school, and how did you start to think about your career when you were getting ready to leave school?
Good question. I suppose maths was always my thing. So don't ask me to write anything down. Terrible handwriting, awful spelling. But maths, I could do maths inside out. So I always knew that I wanted to do something in a mathematical area of work. And I suppose for a small and very short time, I thought about sciences and maybe doing physics, maybe doing something like that and becoming the next astronomer, the next, And then one of my best mates at school has now got like 3 comets named after him, went to Oxford and did all the do. So I'm glad I didn't do that, because there would be nothing like living in the shadow of Dr. Matthew Nicol, who is just brilliant. So astronomy and physics were out. So did maths again, very traditional route, did my GCSEs and A-levels, post-primary, went to university, and maths subjects. So studied economics, decided that I liked how economies worked. I liked to understand what created wealth in a society. And I suppose what really caught me about it was how it impinges on everything in life. There's a really, really good book series called Freakonomics, and I started to read them when I was in kind of lower 6th or upper 6th, when I had a notion that this is something I wanted to do. And it's really a series of short stories that tell you how economics can basically underpin pretty much everything in life, from what you name your child to any other sort of weird and quirky example. And it really captured me. It really captured that something like that, and working in an area where you're trying to create wealth, and that's often described as a bad thing. Wealth is very much sometimes portrayed in the media and in broader society as being a really bad thing, and it can be, especially if it's inequitable. And there's a real issue, in Northern Ireland with income distribution, and the poor and the rich and the gap between them. And I don't deny that at all, but I think the creation of wealth in its general sense, as long as it's inclusive, has such power to transform lives, and transform lives in all areas of life that we're having big issues with, whether that be health, whether that be education, whether that be your well-being and your mental health. It impinges in all of that, quality of life, everything that people value in their life. Is impacted by economics, and that just for me was the ticket. I was happy that I might have a small part to play in that.
So did you studied that after school then? What
yeah, went to Queen's, did my bachelor's in economics there, and then did a master's course in applied economics, which was basically taking the theory that I'd learnt in my bachelor's degree and working out how that actually applies in the real world, because the bachelor's degree was literally just doing mathematics problems day in, day out, working out what supply and demand ratios were, et cetera, which is all well and good, but has absolutely no bearing on the real world. So the applied economics master's course that I did was really the first time it was grounded in policy development, in how you might shape programs and projects, and what interventions and how you formulate interventions that might have an impact, or how you determine whether they will have an impact on the economy, and obviously then what I've talked about, the broader kind of well-being of society.
Yeah, so there's kind of, when we think about something like sustainability, we often think about economic sustainability, social and environmental. Those things are all interconnected.
They're all interconnected. If you can bring, I always think about it from a very individual perspective. So if you can bring one person into a job, into a better job, into a better paid job, you are affecting an entire household of people. You're giving them more disposable income, and with more disposable income, with greater opportunities, you know all the research that's out there suggests that their educational choices and educational attainment of their children is improved. Their health and well-being is improved, because with more disposable income, they can make better choices in terms of what they eat, how they spend their leisure time, what they do as a family unit. They can maybe afford to buy a new house that increases their well-being and their mental well-being. They can go on, there's just so much. If you can just lift one person into a slightly better financial situation, because you've upskilled them, because you've given them tools to apply to a different job, or that you've brought a new employer in who's looking for hundreds of staff and you can get people into it, then that's, for me, that's what it comes down to. Yeah. It's not necessarily about the big picture, broad strategic stuff, which we do every day as well. But for me, it's back down to the reality of the one person that you've managed to help improve their life. Yeah. And that is economics. And economics then impinges on all of those other areas so clearly, for me anyway, that it makes perfect sense. Yeah. It makes perfect sense.
Economics is everywhere.
It's everywhere, and it's everything. And I love it.
John McMullen, who used to head up Bryson Group, he said something very similar to what you've just said, and he summed it up like this. He said, when someone has a job, they have resources, which gives them choices.
That's much more poetic than I articulated.
But it's the same. It's the same. It's the same meaning behind it, and the same just calling out something which is really great for our society. So you talk a bit there about some of the challenges in your work in terms of helping people who are maybe economically inactive with disability, long-term sickness, or maybe just are choosing not to work because the economic conditions for them. Yeah. So like how do we lever? How do we lever some of that? How does that change, Stephen?
Well, we've been trying for 25 years to change the dial on that particular measure. Economic activity in Northern Ireland has not budged in all the time that I've nearly been alive. Yeah. It's sat comfortably at about 25% of our working age population. And when you compare that to the rest of GB, or down to the Republic of Ireland, where it sits at about 12, 11, you can see the challenge, the scale of the challenge we have here. And there have been multiple interventions, multiple new programs, and spearheaded at very senior level across executive as well as at local government level, that have tried to tackle this issue. It comes down probably to intergenerational cycles, and it's trying to break that. And that is the crux of it. We can give all the training, we can go into every community, and we offer all the training that we want, but if the financials for those people do not stack up, then it becomes unviable. And that is probably one of the greatest challenges our society faces today. And you hear the drama in Westminster at the minute, because they're talking about welfare reform, and whatever side of that debate you're on, the welfare system across the UK and in Northern Ireland does need to be looked at, because there is, well, not only because the spending on it has spiraled out of control to the point where it's unaffordable. So from a very supply demand for money, going back to my economics point of view, we cannot afford for the system to continue to grow in the scale that it's growing. But in Northern Ireland in particular, we have lots of historical issues that affect our population still to this day that mean that our dependence upon welfare is higher than in every other region of the United Kingdom. And if you look again down to the other comparator in the Republic of Ireland. So for us, it's probably getting to a point where it is better financially for people to work. And that seems like a really simplistic thing to say. It seems like probably a very sensible, straightforward, logical thing to say. But at the minute, that doesn't work. There's too many people who are scared for their own financial well-being, because if they take on X number of hours of work for X number of pounds, they'll be worse off because they'll have to give up X number of pounds of their welfare. And that's, until we fix that big challenge, all of our interventions will not get the momentum that they need to make an actual dial shift change on it. And it's challenging. It's challenging politically, of course it is. It's challenging for those individuals as well. You're trying to encourage people to fundamentally change how they finance their lives, and and it's often seen as a punishment if you start talking about taking a benefit away or reducing it or tapering it off over a period of time or whatever the mechanism will be. It's politically unpopular, of course it is, because they're votes at the end of the day as well for different political parties, but also it's seen as punishment. It's seen as punishment, and you can't have a blanket policy either. So there will be people who genuinely can't work, and there'll be people who genuinely have reasons why they can't work. So it's not a straightforward area. We are dipping our toe into the surface of it, really, in terms of what we want to do at a local level. We are trying to do it from a purely employer-driven perspective, in that we need to try and find people. So even if I can find a cohort of 25 people and train them, that's better than having nobody trained and get them into work. So we're not doing massive numbers and the numbers we need back to our 12, 15,000 vacancies. We're not going to solve that problem, but we will try everything that we can to try and shift the dial in our local area around that. But the broader challenges still exist.
If I think of the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach, so top-down, as you've mentioned, we've been trying this for a long time, policies, strategies, funding, and then you have at a community level, someone on a street in Mosley or Antrim getting a job and talking to their neighbour about how much they love their new job, and that neighbour thinks about it, is a bit inspired and all of that. Like, what's going to have the biggest impact? Is it going to be that continue to try and put a top down, or is it at that community base?
There's definitely a community element to it. There's no doubt. As I said earlier, I think it's intergenerational, yes. So it's within households, it's intergenerational, but it's also within communities. And there are communities, and they're well documented. There's been plenty of research done to identify them that have particular challenges around economic inactivity. And we work very, very closely, both at a political level with our elected members, but also as a team, to go into those areas. And it is challenging to go into those areas and try and offer these people an alternative to what they know, and to try and encourage them to undertake training and skills, and almost with no guarantee of what will come out of it, and we can't offer any guarantee around the finances or what it will do for their families and their home in some instances, because there'll be plenty of people in those categories who have help paying for their home, and you're talking about putting that at risk. Like, it is a massive commitment for them, and for people who aren't used to work, aren't in jobs, don't know the kind of routine that everybody else kind of takes for granted. It's a big step. So 100% there's a community element, and we will continue to push really, really hard through the programmes and interventions we have. LMP is £400,000 in Antrim Newtownabbey. So in the grand scheme of it, it's money, and we appreciate the finance that we get from the department, and we will continue to do as much as we can with that money. But that money's not going to fix the problem. Mm-hmm. So I do think if we don't tackle it at the top level as well, within policy, around how we encourage or incentivize, maybe that's the better word, is incentivization to enter work, rather than trying to make it sound like it's a negative thing and a punishment. If we incentivize that does require policy change, and it does require leadership at the top level. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, just as we come to a close, Workplus is called Workplus because we believe work is a positive thing. And you mentioned a bit about the importance of having people in work, but for you, what's so good about work?
I love that question. That's a good question. So I am privileged because I love my job, and I think that in itself makes such a difference. I don't grumble. I don't have Sunday night dread. I don't have any of these things. I love my job, and that sounds really cliche, and it sounds really, I know, parochial to say it like that, but I genuinely do. And I love my job for all of the reasons I've talked about today with you, about how you impact lives. We were saying it yesterday. One of those young people come up to you and say, you've made a difference to me. You've made a difference to my prospects. You've made a difference to my career choices. You've made a difference to my family. Like, what more do you need in terms of reward for your work and for what you and your team are trying to do than those young people coming at you, or a person in a new job and they're thriving in their new job and they're providing for their family and they're settled and their children have better, so I could do that all day. That just makes me so happy. So I love my job, and that makes work for me easy. And I know that's not consistent. I think work gives you purpose, and I think everybody, regardless of where you are or what situation you find yourself in, you're driven by a purpose. You're driven by a need or a desire to do better, to try and to improve the situation you find yourself in. And I think a job gives you that purpose. It gives you something to work towards. It's good for relationships. It's good for your social structure. It's good for your mental well-being. It gives you outlets for creativity and innovation. It gives you outlets for imagination, and it gives you outlets that you maybe don't even know you need to in terms of trying to focus in on stuff that you want to deliver and want to do. So yeah, for me, it's probably mostly around purpose. I think it gives people that structure. It gives them routine. It gives them something to build a life around. And it's such an important part of your life. If you're in work and you're in full-time work, I don't know what retirement age I'll get to. It'll be about 77 by the time I'm retiring. But, you work for such a span of your life. There's no point doing it if you don't enjoy it and you can't find fulfillment out of it. If that's the case, you're in the wrong job. And, that is part of the problem as well. And I know it's not as easy. It's easy for me to sit here and say you're in the wrong job and you should do something different. But, you only got one shot at this existence, so you have to try and make the best of it. And as I say, I love what I do. I love the impact we have as a team. I love that we're allowed the freedom to be innovative and to be creative and to come with novel and weird and quirky ideas, and the members, to their absolute credit, come with us and don't say, Stephen, what are you talking about now? So for me, that's probably what I love most about it.
Brilliant. Well, I wish you continued success in your work and all the impact that you're having. And thanks so much for coming in today.
No, thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Workplus. If today's story gave you fresh perspective or helped you rethink what's possible, leave us a review on your favourite podcast platform or hit like and subscribe. It really does make a big difference. For more stories, resources, and tools to help guide the next generation, visit workplus.app. Until next time.